To bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to Brazier from 4 until 6. Coming up, GB News has filmed exclusive footage of the battle between people smuggling gangs and French police as migrants try to board small boats to head to the UK. We've got reaction and analysis with our Home and Security editor Mark White and GB News presenter Nigel Farage over the next 2 hours. Also today, detectives investigating the murder of a grandfather, 89-year-old man, stabbed whilst riding a mobility scooter. They have this afternoon, within the past 90 minutes, released images of a man seen running from the scene armed with a knife. Our national reporter is live at the scene this afternoon to bring us the latest. Also this hour, we'll ask, are British workers lazy? Liz Truss has come under fire after a leaked video shows the Tory leadership hopeful, claiming British workers need more graft and lack the skill and application of foreign rivals. Does she have a point? The thoughts of the entrepreneur Charlie Mullins. And after 4:30 from the UK to the US, in a shade over 3 hours. Well, we've heard about plans to build a supersonic passenger plane to replace Concorde before, many times in fact. Now those planes are real. American Airlines has ordered 30 of the new jets. The chief exec of the UK Flight Safety Committee will have his say. With me for the next 2 hours, senior GB News contributor Tim Montgomery, no stranger to Concorde he. But first, the latest news headlines with Ray.
Thanks, Colin. Good afternoon. 2 minutes past 4, I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. Inflation is rising at its fastest pace in 40 years. The Consumer Price Index rose to 10.1% in July from 9.4% in June. Rising food prices are believed to be making the biggest impact. It follows the news yesterday that wages are falling at their fastest rate since records began. Speaking after the latest hustings event in Northern Ireland, Prime Ministerial hopefuls Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss said they had a plan for the economy.
Well, today's inflation figures show how serious the situation is. Inflation is the enemy. It makes everyone poorer, it destroys jobs, it eats into people's pensions and savings, and it pushes up mortgage rates. As I've consistently said, inflation is the greatest challenge facing the new Prime Minister. Now, I have the right plan to get a grip of inflation, to support the people who most need our help with the cost of living, and to grow our economy so that we never have to deal with this again.
What I'm not going to do on this show is predict a future budget, but what I can assure people is this is an urgent issue and I will make sure it's dealt with. Ultimately, I want a high-wage, high-growth economy. The fact is we've had 2 decades of low growth in this country. I will not continue with business as usual. I will be bold in making the change we need to help people right across our country.
An elderly man who was stabbed to death while riding a mobility scooter has been named as 87-year-old Thomas O'Halloran. Police are describing the attack in Greenford, West London, as a shocking act of unprovoked violence. Detectives have released images of a man fleeing the scene, armed with a knife, who they want to speak to as a matter of urgency. He's described as wearing grey shorts, a dark T-shirt and a white baseball cap. Former Labour MP Stephen Pound told GB News he knew the victim and he was well liked in the community.
Tom was a real character, a real local character. He used to be outside Greenford Station playing the accordion, sometimes and occasionally a harmonica, but usually an accordion. And he was absolutely, you see the smile on the face of him. He was a sweet, sweet, lovely man. The brutality, the cruelty, or the apparent random nastiness and the evil of his death actually really is corrosive to us. And it's going to take a while for us to recover.
Survivors of the infected blood scandal will be given £100,000 in compensation, the government has announced. It's the first time that victims will receive payments after 4 decades of campaigning. 2,400 people died after being infected with HIV and hepatitis C in the 70s and 80s. Police officers in England and Wales who are violent towards women will be dismissed and barred from rejoining the profession under new guidance. The College of Policing launched a review into the current penalties for breaches of police standards in a bid to improve public confidence. It's after a string of cases involving officers committing offences against women, the most high-profile being the death of Sarah Everard. Cristiano Ronaldo has been cautioned by police after appearing to knock a phone out of an Everton fan's hand at a match in April. Merseyside police launched an investigation after video footage of the incident was circulated online at Goodison Park. The Man United player was interviewed under caution following an allegation of assault and criminal damage. The 37-year-old also issued a social media apology and invited the supporter to watch a game at Old Trafford. Rail, tube and bus passengers face fresh travel disruption over the next few days as tens of thousands of staff walk out in disputes over pay and conditions. Members of the RMT, TSSA and Unite unions will be involved in the action. Tomorrow and Saturday, only a fifth of overground services will run as staff working for Network Rail and several other train operators strike, along with London United bus drivers. Meanwhile, on Friday, London Underground and buses in the capital will be hit again by walkouts. Firefighters in Spain have battled to stop a wildfire reaching a residential area following weeks of hot, dry weather. The fire started after a lightning bolt set an area ablaze on Sunday, burning through almost 30 acres in the Valencia region. 11 villages have been evacuated whilst many other residents have been asked to stay indoors. 2 firefighters have suffered burns from the fires but remain in stable conditions. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Colin Brazier.
Hi there, it's nearly 7 minutes past 4. Thanks for your company today. We start with this story. GB News has witnessed the cat and mouse tactics between French police and Channel migrants as the authorities face an almost impossible task of mounting effective patrols over many, many miles of the French coastline. Over days of filming, our team saw police using beach buggies to intercept groups of migrants before dispersing them with tear gas. But the criminal gangs are simply regrouping and making a dash for the sea again the moment police move off to chase other groups of migrants further down the beach. I'm joined by our Home and Security Editor Mark White, who's here with us to talk over some of that footage that our team has gathered. Tim Montgomery is alongside him and will be alongside me for the rest of today's show for the next 2 hours. Mark, what did we see?
Well, we saw a lot, and it's important, I think, because we've obviously, whenever we can, it's good to try to get out to the French side to see what's happening there in terms of the policing effort. Now, we witnessed boats trying to get out and getting out. You can see this large green inflatable being pushed out by a group of migrants, and then these incredible drone pictures from above as well. Now, we counted them, and there are 50 people that get onto this vessel. Not an inch of space on this vessel, absolutely full to the gunnels as it heads out into the English Channel and across to UK waters. 20,500 people have crossed so far this year. Now, this vessel set off from a stretch of coastline at Gravelines, which is between Dunkirk and Calais. It's one of the preferred beaches for the people smugglers, but there's a vast area of coastline there in northwestern France. Many miles. It's really difficult for the French police to be there in any numbers. Apologies
if you are listening on radio, but as Mark describes it, you can paint a picture, can't you? And it's also a picture that we see reflected back at us of a mill pond, the English Channel, Mark, at this time of the year. You can see why you get this seasonal spike in the summer. Yes, I mean, the images that the viewers can see now, and I'm describing for radio, are showing a group of migrants, about a dozen or so, that are visible there within the dunes heading down towards the beach. Now, we spoke about these buggies. You can see them coming into shot now that the French police have used.
and they try to intercept them as quickly as possible, firing off clouds of tear gas as well to try to disperse the groups. And yes, they run off into the dunes, Colin, and the police are there in numbers fairly quickly, but there's so many of these Channel migrants trying to cross in these boats that the police, when they inevitably head back down the beach to another sighting to deal with that, then the group that they've just been with are then regrouped by the people smugglers, and then they take a pop again to see if they can get back out to sea. And we know that even though it maybe takes a few attempts to do that, Colin, they are successful in the end in the vast majority of cases.
It just feels, I know we've talked this to and fro, Mark, again and again, haven't we? But it does feel sometimes when you look at that, the clarity of that drone footage and how easy it was for us, a commercial journalistic organisation, to get that footage. And this technology is available to the authorities. I mean, somebody was saying to me a couple of days ago, you know, drone tech's really cheap. You get a drone that literally rams into these inflatable dinghies, punctures the thing before it gets into deeper waters. Stop the problem just off the shore.
Yeah, and this is happening, though. The Royal Navy, the French authorities as well, they have drones up. They have helicopters. The Royal Navy have been operating a Wildcat helicopter in a reconnaissance mode since they've been in charge of command and control. They're up there, these drones. They're filming in real time. They will have filmed that as we filmed it as well. The difficulty is, this is happening in seconds. It doesn't take them more than a minute or so to get from the dunes into the water, and by the time you then radio on to the buggies and the police, it takes them a few minutes to get back there. Yeah. They're fighting. It is like the game whack-a-mole, isn't it? You know, you get rid of them, you get them down at one point, they pop up at another point, you're away, and then they get back offshore.
Tim Montgomery.
Well, seeing this footage and hearing things that you've said before, Mark, and that Nigel Farage just sent, you know, we spent a lot of money, you know, on the French efforts to try and stop this. And, you know, because of the ease with which they're clearly evading the police, it just underlines to me the absolute important centrality that the only way we're ever going to get on top of this is actually by a mass return of these people once they're over the channel. We can do bits to prevent, and we can do bits to make it harder for them to cross. But ultimately, I think the only thing that it's going to discourage this crossings, which undermine people's confidence in our ability to control our own borders, is if we start returning people en masse to some place like Rwanda. And when the next Prime Minister comes into office, they have to make this absolutely one of their number one priorities.
Because, Colin, this is highly lucrative. That boat, 50 people on board. Now, if they were being charged, what the going rate is £5,000 per head. That's £250,000 for that boat alone. Now, we're told in order to get even more people coming forward to get on their boats, they're reducing prices by £1,000 or £2,000, but still highly profitable. So as Tim says, you know, the people smugglers, the model and the people willing to cross, they're all there. They're going to continue unless you have a proper joined-up strategy with the French, where the French are willing to bite the bullet and take the people that cross the channel immediately back, deal with them on that side in the hope of breaking the model. You're not really going to stop it, I'm afraid.
Mark, really appreciate it. Thanks very much indeed. Mark White there. Nigel Farage will join me at the top of the next hour, and then Nigel introducing all that footage in a special report from 7 o'clock. Do stay tuned for that. Now, the latest set of inflation figures now stands at 10.1%. This for the 12 months to July. That is a new 40-year high. The Bank of England is forecasting a peak number of more than 13% come October, with the cost of living squeeze hitting households showing no signs of diminishing. Well, this winter, the energy price cap is forecast to rise to over £3,500. Earlier today, the Chancellor, Nadhim Zahawi, vowed to leave no stone unturned to offer families and businesses support.
We prepare all the options ready for the incoming Prime Minister on the 5th September to hit the ground running of what more we can do, whether it is the green levies that we need to remove to help with those energy bills, cutting taxes, increasing our gas production here at home, And of course, the one thing that I'm beginning to really get concerned about is the impact on small businesses because of the energy spike that they're seeing, which is obviously going to put huge pressure on SMEs. 5.9 million small businesses are the backbone of the British economy.
Well, our business and economics editor, Liam Halligan, is here. Liam, I think the forecast for this figure is 9.8%, so it's come in higher than...
Some people forecast that.
OK.
Yeah.
What was your forecast?
Easily into double digits.
Was it? So it's not even in line with what you thought, but it's still bad.
Yeah, I mean, inflation going into double digits for the first time since Madonna made her debut and Michael Jackson produced Thriller is obviously a big deal. And the underlying reality is a lot of hardship for a lot of not well off and actually previously comfortable families. This is a cost of living crisis. I also think, Colin, it's a cost of lockdown crisis. I think a lot of the inflation is because the global economy was shuttered for 2 years. It's trying to reboot. You had massive
Which is why inflation's global, Liam, right?
Massive post-lockdown surge in demand around the world. The world's factories and companies couldn't respond. And that mismatch between supply and demand is why we've got inflation. Some of us were predicting this in the spring of 2021. I've got newspaper columns to prove it. The Bank of England said, no way, you're talking nonsense, inflation's transitory. They're not saying that now. The Bank of England, to its credit, is now trying to get ahead of this. It's saying inflation will peak at just over 13% in October. I think that's about right, because that's when a new energy price cap comes in from Ofgem. But I think after that, there is a hint of good news here.
Well, go on, because, I mean, that use of the word transitory.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a peak, right? And then it starts to come down.
It will start to come down. It will start to come down, I think, after this autumn. And not only because I think global energy prices will start to come off. We're already seeing that in the oil market.
Oil's coming down.
Oil's 25% down on the peak of earlier this summer. That will take some time to feed through. But if you look at things like lumber prices or timber, as we say...
So you're having the extension done, it feeds into the cost of...
Yeah. Timber prices are coming down, energy prices are coming down. That semiconductor shortage that we've spoken so much about on my show, on your show, that's starting to ease. Those factories in Asia are starting to get back up to speed. And I think also that the government will come forward with help. It has to. I think the Tory leadership contest has gone on for too long.
Crisis might have been the right word.
It's gone on for too long. I think the government will start to get its arms around this. There will be support, particularly for lower income households. So while it will be a tough time this autumn and winter, we must be careful, Colin, not to talk ourselves into an absolute crisis when we can get through this.
Yeah. Tim?
Well, look, I absolutely agree. It's a question of when, not if, the next Prime Minister comes forward with a major package to help.
30 billion quid's worth for 6 months?
I think that may not be the right answer. I think one of the differences between Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak is Rishi Sunak's package really did go way up the income spectrum. So the cost of his package partly reflected the fact that he was helping high earners as well as low earners. I suspect, rightly or wrongly, Liz Truss will go for a much more focused package. I think you probably need to help all pensioners, but for some reason there's a reluctance in the Treasury to use the universal credit system. I think it's partly because when they did an uplift of £20 during the pandemic and then tried to take it away when the pandemic was over, people don't like losing something they've been given. They think it's forever, which is why they tried the one-off measure that Rishi Sunak did in the autumn for people struggling with the
They did in the end, though, manage to do that £20, I won't say reduction, reversion to where it was. And I think Tim's right. Liz Truss is getting criticised because she wants tax cuts. Will they benefit the rich more? So I think she's going to counter that. She's not going to raise corporation tax. I think that's the right thing to do. She's going to counter that accusation while taking away the national insurance rise and so on with very targeted measures when it comes to energy. She's already said she wants to take those green levies off energy bills.
Yep.
And that disproportionately helps the poor, Colin, because they disproportionately pay a higher part of their income for energy.
And if you look we looked at this graph earlier, Colin, if you look at the actual inflation rate, it's bad enough for everyone, but actually the poor are being hit more by inflation. Yeah. They have a higher inflation rate because of the nature of the goods they buy than richer people. So the inflation rate is even worse for the poor.
Tim, Liam, we'll leave it there, but thanks very much indeed. Much more inflation, I'm sure, through the course of the next few months. Sad to say. Though, who knows, as Liam might be suggesting there, a corner could be in sight that we are ready to turn, so ready to turn. We're going to be reflecting too on that dreadful killing in the course of the next hour in a suburb of West London. 89-year-old man, yesterday, broad daylight at tea time, in the suburb of Greenford in West London. A local busker, collects money for Ukraine, amongst other things, was stabbed to death. It feels like a horrible punctuation mark in the capital city's crime story. Some people saying it shouldn't be taken out of context. I certainly take the view that it's one of those seminal moments in policing that needs to be seriously reflected upon, and we'll do that through the course of the rest of the programme. Also coming up, cyclists could face 20-mile-an-hour speed limits and may have to display number plates in a bid to crack down on dangerous riders. I'll speak to the man who's been described as Britain's most hated cyclist about those proposals next.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News. I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Lots of emails coming in on the subject of that investigation, the footage we've filmed from the French coastline. Nigel Farage is going to be talking you through that footage in about half an hour's time here on our show. That investigation into migrant crossings. Steve says, surely the drones above the beaches in France can locate the boats in the dunes, send the location to police and the authorities, and the boat can be destroyed before they have time to launch. Is there a more reasonable question than that? Paul says the migrant crisis could be solved at a stroke. We still owe £30 billion to the EU. Inform them that for each of their illegal migrants landing on our shore, we will withhold £50,000. John says, so why doesn't the French just allow the British to return the migrants back through Eurotunnel back to France? Dam says, Macron is just putting on a show. There is no will to do anything seriously in France. If France really wanted to put a stop to this horrendous people trafficking, they would use drones to stop boats and inflatables getting anywhere near the beach. And anyone who did get into the water should be taken back and not insist they end up in the UK. That would stop this instantly. A story that's generating huge interest online and I suspect elsewhere today. It's a horrible story and one which is deserving of the attention, sadly, that it's getting. It's the story of an 87-year-old man who was stabbed to death on his mobility scooter. It's been named by the Metropolitan Police, because this happened in London today, as Thomas O'Halloran, an engineer originally from County Clare in Ireland. Police have released images of the victim, but also of a suspect who is seen fleeing the scene armed, it would appear, with a knife. they want to identify and speak with him as a matter of urgency. Our national reporter, Paul Hawkins, is in the London suburb of Greenford, where this terrible crime happened. Paul, welcome to you. What do you know?
Yeah, we've been speaking to people in Greenford since 6 a.m. this morning, Colin. Just to reappraise to you of what we know about what happened yesterday afternoon, just after 4 o'clock, police, the emergency services, paramedics called to the spot just behind me, next to the A40, busy road, very busy road, heading eastbound into London. They found an 87-year-old grandfather on his mobility scooter suffering with stab wounds. They treated him at the scene, but sadly he passed away. Now, we've learned today that his name is Thomas O'Halloran. He was a very popular, well-known figure around Greenford. He very notably played the accordion over at Greenford Station, also at the Tesco's not far away from here, and the community, I think it's fair to say, are shocked at what has happened. We'll hear from them in just a moment, but first, here is Sean Wilson from the Met Police speaking to us earlier.
Yesterday, an 87-year-old grandfather on a mobility scooter had his life needlessly snatched away in a shocking act of unprovoked violence. We believe that Mr. O'Halloran was stabbed in Western Avenue shortly after 4 p.m. yesterday, Tuesday, the 16th of August, before managing to travel 75 yards or so on his mobility scooter to Runnymede Gardens, where he flagged down a member of public for help.
No arrests have been made so far, but police have released an image of the suspect. They're looking for a man described as wearing grey shorts, a dark-coloured T-shirt, a white baseball cap and white patterned builder-style gloves. They want to speak to him or anyone that knows about him in connection with this incident. As I say, no arrests have been made. The investigation is ongoing, and people here very shocked, very well loved, very well known member of the community. This is what one man called Ali, who he spoke to earlier on, who runs a bakery just near Greenford Station, where you would often see Thomas busking. He often went into this bakery and he got to know the owner, Ali, very well. Here's what Ali told us about Thomas.
When I was younger, I remember him having a three-wheeler car. It was very distinctive, so he used to come out, start joking about, start laughing. We were like the local bakers who would come in for his bread and his breakfast. He'd go next door for like his drinks, his scratch cards and whatnot. So if you lived in Greenford, you're guaranteed, like, you must have seen him. Yeah, and he used to play the xylophone quite recently. He used to say his pension, it wasn't enough for him, and he wanted a bit of extra money and whatnot, so he played the xylophone.
Yeah, so, the community very much in shock here. Police, as well as appealing for any information in relation to that image of the suspect, also asking for many people who would have been driving down around this time yesterday afternoon, who have cameras on their dashboards, cameras on their vehicles. They may have caught something on their camera that would be of interest to the police. If you think that's you, then do get in touch with the Metropolitan Police as they look to try and apprehend this suspect, who is described as a dangerous man.
That's Paul Hawkins there in Greenford in West London. Paul, thanks very much indeed. Tim Montgomery is alongside me and will be until 6 o'clock today. I was tweeting last night, Tim, this morning as well, about this story, and I've been in this business for a few decades now, and I've got a gnawing feeling at the back of my head that if this story had happened 20 years ago, it would have precipitated a bout of national soul-searching. A man in his late 80s on a mobility scooter stabbed to death in broad daylight. We need to think hard about what's going on.
Yeah, you remember the Jamie Bolger story, which when Tony Blair was Shadow Home Secretary, and his outrage at that sort of seemed to be a big moment in his acceptance by the British people ahead of becoming Prime Minister. And this is just so awful. Every ingredient that you've just described, a grandfather on a mobility scooter, stabbed to death, and not instantly. Clearly he was alive after this attack because he went along the road to flag down someone to help him. It must have been a horrible death. And you literally want to close your eyes because, that man reminds us, many of us, of our own grandfather, our own family. And the only thing that's good about this, and there's so little that's good, is thank God for CCTV. These pictures of the suspect look very clear, and let's hope for a rapid arrest. And anyone who has any hint that they know this person, please call the authorities immediately, because you could see someone like this trying to escape the country. Let's hope they are caught very, very quickly.
Tim Montgomery, thanks very much indeed. Keep your thoughts coming in, please, on that story and the rest of the news we're covering today. You're with Colin Brazier on GB News, on TV Online and on digital radio. Coming up, we've got all the other stories of the day, including our Speaker's Corner, a feature. That's going to be Tim Montgomery talking about why Boris Johnson is showing what Tim believes is a selfish streak. We'll also debate one of the big topics of the day. Are British workers lazy? Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, probably our future Prime Minister, has been coming under fire for saying that Brits need more graft. They need to remember how to work hard, or some of them do at least. We'll be pondering on that one. First, let's bring you the latest news headlines. Here's Ray.
Thanks, Colin. 4:30, here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Inflation is rising at its fastest pace in 40 years as the Consumer Price Index reaches double figures. It rose to 10.1% in July from 9.4% in June. It's understood rising food prices are having the biggest impact. It's as the latest figures show wages are falling at their fastest rate since records began. An 87-year-old man who was stabbed to death while riding a mobility scooter has been named. Police have described the attack on Thomas O'Halloran as a shocking act of unprovoked violence. Detectives have released images of a man fleeing the scene armed with a knife that they want to identify and speak to. Cristiano Ronaldo has been cautioned by police after appearing to knock a phone out of an Everton fan's hand at a match in April. Merseyside police launched an investigation after video footage of the incident at Goodison Park was circulated online. The 37-year-old also issued a social media apology and invited the supporter to watch a game at Old Trafford. Rail, tube and bus passengers face fresh travel disruption over the next few days as tens of thousands of staff walk out in disputes over pay and conditions. RMT, TSSA and Unite Union members will all be involved in the action. Tomorrow and Saturday, only a fifth of overground services will run. Meanwhile, on Friday, London Underground and buses in the capital will be hit again by walkouts. And in the last couple of minutes, Royal Mail workers have voted in favour of strike action in a dispute over terms and conditions. The Communication Workers Union announced the decision, saying the result of the ballot had been overwhelmingly in favour of industrial action. We'll bring you more on this story as we have it. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Back now to Colin Brazier.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
But first, a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.204 and 1.185 euros. The price of gold currently standing at £1,464.76 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It is time for today's visit to our Speaker's Corner. This is the part of the show where we let our studio guests get their views off their chest about a topic they're passionate about. Today it's the turn of senior GB News contributor Tim Montgomery with his letter to the Prime Minister. For the next 2 minutes or so, Tim, the show is yours.
Hi, Boris. I no idea if you'll actually see this message, as I think you're on your second holiday in a fortnight. Now, I've no objection to anyone taking a break. We all need rest. But if I only had a few weeks left as Prime Minister, I'd probably have waited a little while longer before going away. That way, for example, I could have held a party for England women's football winners, could have turned up for the opening of the Commonwealth Games. I might even have coordinated some policy preparations for escalating energy costs. I certainly hope Liz Truss doesn't find out about your absences. Apparently she prefers grafters to grifters. And while talking about Liz Truss, who certainly is going to be your successor, why have you said nothing to discourage the loud and concerted campaign from Lord Cruddas to reinstate you? The campaign undermines her even before she even starts. Is it because you're still suffering from hurty feelings? Do you feel that you was robbed of the Prime Ministership? Well, Mr Johnson, here's why, even without your ethical lapses, you've got nought to complain about. Inflation, which you said wasn't going to happen, is the highest in Europe. Taxes at the highest level in history. You abandoned your house-building agenda. Migrants continue to cross the channel in record numbers. You went all Greta Thunberg on climate change, rather than standing with pensioners on energy bills. You kept lockdown going for far, far too long. And wokery isn't retreating in Whitehall, but tens of millions of pounds of taxpayers' money is being spent on, for example, teaching civil servants about white privilege and that women shouldn't be called women. All on your watch. So, Boris, I'll always be grateful for your leadership on Ukraine, for preventing Jeremy Corbyn from becoming PM and getting Brexit over the line. But you wasted the majority of 80 that you won. And don't use the pandemic as an excuse for leaving a terrible mess for your successor to clean up. If William Beveridge could produce his blueprint for the welfare state during World War II, you could have come up with more than the nothing burger that you have. So hasta la vista, but mate, get over it. And please don't even try to come back.
Yeah, that's right. That's former Boris Johnson advisor Tim Montgomery, who is no longer getting a Christmas card from the Prime.
I'm not expecting to be invited to leaving drinks or things anytime soon.
No. But that's heartfelt. You feel he's fallen asleep at the wheel, big time.
Yeah, and I'm sure some people watching now will think it's sour grapes, and maybe there is an element of that. But very early on in his premiership, after he'd won, I said to him that I thought his Downing Street operation wasn't working. And he just completely ignored the advice. I warned him that I thought the dysfunctionality I saw would bring him down. And, it ended up with partying on the night before the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral in Downing Street. He wasn't there on that occasion, but he was, I think, responsible for a culture that, I'm afraid, led to his demise.
Tim, thanks very much indeed. Tim Montgomery's monologue you'll be able to see online very soon if you'd like to reflect on his words there. And maybe if you're the Prime Minister, you might want to as well. The Channel migration crisis. Emails are plenty. Let's share some of them with you. Al says the only way to stop this completely is to raise a British and French task force to track down and intercept the traffickers and arrest them to put them out of business. Unless this is done, the problem will not stop. These coming in on the stabbing, the murder of Thomas O'Halloran, a man on a mobility scooter, tea time yesterday in a suburb of West London, stabbed to death in his late 80s. Paul says we're all becoming desensitised to the violence which is now happening so often. Peter says, I think the death penalty should return for people who commit cowardly acts such as these. Tim, if you've drawn breath, let me just put that final point to you, because I know it's considered very bad manners, and as a Catholic, I've got no truck with the death penalty, but I observe that a lot of people still think it's a good idea.
Yeah, and it's sort of I don't support the death penalty either, partly because I worry about miscarriages of justice. And in a way, I think, a life sentence behind bars is a worse punishment in some ways. But it is one of those issues where sort of the elite in the country, MPs, etc., do seem to be quite out of touch with public opinion. And when opinion polls are taken on this, there is a particular desire, for example, for the death penalty for the murder of a policeman, or perhaps someone in this example, which is such a horrible crime, to kill a man in a mobility scooter, a grandfather. It's just, it makes my blood boil.
Yeah, as it does many of our viewers and listeners, you can be sure, today. A very different kind of story. A happier one, actually. American Airlines has agreed to purchase up to 20 aircraft from Boom Supersonic. That would bring back supersonic transatlantic flights come the end of the decade. The important thing to note about this story, it's not just one of those articles that appears in a Sunday newspaper with lots of lovely pictures and diagrams, but never then actually happens. This is an order that has been placed for real jets with real money. The jets, they've been called the Air to Concorde. They look like Concorde, don't they? Apologies if you're listening on the radio, but if you remember what Concorde looks like, the new plane looks just like it, with different livery. It'll travel twice as fast as most commercial aircraft, making, for instance, the flight time from London to New York in a shade over 3 hours. Concorde was retired by British Airways, as you'll remember, in the wake of that fatal crash on the outskirts of Paris. The chief executive of the UK Flight Safety Committee and former RAF pilot is Di Whittingham, who joins me now. Di Whittingham, welcome to you. I mean, from reading about this story, it does seem to be distinguishable from all those other stories which you'll have read about, I've read about, that suggest, you'll be able to fly around the world in 5 hours and it never comes to anything. This is a real order.
It is. This aircraft is still on the drawing board, but there is an awful lot of activity going on to try and, if you like, re-enable supersonic flight. So Concorde, great aeroplane, spent, I think it was 27 years in commercial service, and was still viable towards the end until it became too costly to support from an airworthiness perspective. So one of the things that limited Concorde was the noise, and anywhere near major airports, noise is an issue. So there is a research program going on in the USA at the moment. Lockheed Martin has built something called the X-59 for NASA, and the aim there is to reduce the impact of a sonic boom to about the same level of noise you get from closing a car door. And they plan to do that by controlling the way the shock waves actually separate from the aircraft as it's in supersonic flight.
I mean, Di, just before we leave the noise, just before we leave the noise aside, I mean, it's worth just labouring that point, really, because there's also the environmental aspects of how much fuel they use and all the rest of it. But just on the noise point specifically, I remember, I used to live in Twickenham, and you would hear that going over twice a day, and it was a din, it was a tremendous din. But it really came home to me when I was in the car park at Heathrow as Concorde took off, and so many car alarms were set off by it. It was that noisy.
Yes, and the Boom aircraft are going to have different engines. Clearly, that was a reheated Olympus first generation or second generation turbojet. So it was an early engine. Engines are generally much quieter and more efficient. So there is an issue about sustainability, and you would expect that to have been taken care of with things like synthetic aviation fuel, which is much greener. and you would expect improvements in the design because Concorde was designed, or the study started in the 50s, mid-50s. It was built with slide rules and not computers. First it was 1969. So it was very early doors. It was way ahead of its time. You now have composites, carbon fiber, 3D manufacturing, 3D printing of components. So there'll be lighter structures and so on. But it's planned to do Mach 1.7, which is, in broad terms, 17 miles a minute. It will get you here much faster.
It will make the journey much more quickly, but it's still going to be a fairly cramped fuselage, isn't it?
I'm not sure of the exact dimensions. It's only going to take, I think, 88 passengers, up to 88 passengers. But Concorde was cramped, and nobody who flew in it really minded because they're only in it for 3 hours. And actually, if there is any discomfort, it's for such a short duration that people will put up with that.
Well, the discomfort was felt in the pockets, wasn't it, for a £7,000 ticket, just so you could brag about the fact you'd been on Concorde?
Yeah, indeed so. But people were prepared to pay those premium prices to get the premium service, and particularly to be able to do New York and back in a day, for example, made a big difference.
Di, final thought. Is there a market for it, given that we've been told for years that there wasn't? The market was for more comfort in, on big airliners that were also environmentally sensitive. Is there a market for this kind of plane?
There is. It will need to satisfy the regulators, both here and in the States and Europe and wherever else it operates, that it is safe, that the noise that it produces is acceptable, that it meets the environmental emission limits that they're looking for across aviation. And there are people out there who will pay, and many of those are now voting with their wallets with business flights, private jet flights instead. So some of that traffic will move onto this supersonic effort once it comes on stream. But I think it's going to be a few years yet. The experimental aircraft in the States was due to fly this year. It may still, but it'll be some years, I think, before we see this overture aircraft, as it's called, in the skies.
Di Whittingham, appreciate your expertise. Thanks very much indeed. Tim Montgomery is alongside me. Di Whittingham rather undermined my thesis, which was that this is off the drawing board and into production. It's not. It's still a little bit of a pipe dream, it turns out.
I'm interested in your comment about the cramped nature of the...
not from personal experience.
No, of course not, not. But the people listening on radio won't have seen the promotion video that viewers will have done. And I noted, actually, the beautiful pictures of the outside, but nothing about the inside. But what I am willing to offer Overture, the company of mine, is if they do provide me with a few glasses of champagne, I am willing to put up with to pilot the internal crampedness.
Tim, thanks very much indeed. Time for our debate this hour. It's this one. Liz Truss has been accused of branding some British workers, as lazy after a leaked recording from some years ago showed her saying, or recorded her saying, the UK workforce, elements of it needed, quote, more graft. She also said those outside London were less likely to be hard workers and that British workers lacked the skill and application of foreign rivals, especially from China. We're asking, in light of that, are some British workers, lazy? We're joined by the founder of Pimlico Plumbers, Charlie Mullins, and the political commentator, Andre Walker. Gentlemen, thanks both for joining us. Charlie Mullins, hi. Lazy or not?
Undoubtedly. I think she made this comment 4 or 5 years ago, and which we had problems then. And I think now it's more appropriate than ever because of the pandemic, because of the working from home, because of the recession that's coming up. And we need to step it up. There's no two ways about that. I think we've missed the EU workers when they went back. I think we lost nearly 500,000 of them. And we now have 1.3 million job vacancies. And it was only about 800,000 before the EU members left, which now means that it just goes to prove that we don't want the work. I mean, we've always complained about the EU workers coming over and nicking their jobs, and now they've gone back. We still don't want the job, so that's nothing but laziness.
Andre Walker, what say you?
Well, it's really interesting. I was talking to a farmer in Berkshire, near where I live, and what he was saying was that when Polish people came over, they really revolutionised farming in Britain. It was just very simple things, like he said, if a combine harvester would break down with a British worker, everybody would stop and call the mechanic, whereas the Poles would actually fix the combine harvester themselves. Now, that was something that Liz Truss was talking about, the fact that there was potentially a skills gap. She didn't say it explicitly, but she certainly implied it. And I think actually that's true. There is a greater tendency with a lot of the people that came in from Eastern Europe to have more skills when it came to just practical bits and bobs like that. So I think that that's an important thing potentially, not for British workers, but actually for British schools. And on the point that we hear so often when people say, oh, we want to bring people over to do the jobs we don't want to do. Number one, I believe that that's genuinely racist to say that. I don't believe that just because you're Estonian, you should aspire to clean my toilet. But equally, you know, what we effectively do in this country is we put people on the dole, we pay all their benefits, and then we import people to the country to do the jobs that they should be doing, but they can't because they're on benefits. Now, that to me is absolutely crazy. So I don't think that you're talking about the totality of the labour market, but I think the fact that you have some people sitting around drinking special brew and eating pizzas and expecting us to bring people in from Latvia to replace them in the workforce, I think that is a significant problem.
Charlie Mullins, are we not in danger of running down millions of hard-working Brits who actually, if you take something like car production, with the right organisation, the right technology, after the dog days of the 1970s, the trades unions and all British Leyland and all the rest of it, people said, we can't make cars, we're no good at that sort of stuff. And actually, come the 1990s, we proved that we could, as good as anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, look, Colin, let's get this straight. I'm not knocking or running down millions of hard-working Brits. I'm knocking and running down millions of non-hard-working Brits. The people that go to work and work hard, they're great, and no one's entitled to knock them. They need to be paid more and looked after more. I'm talking about the people that are not prepared to go to work, the people that want to work from home, that can go into work, which I believe is the better way. I'm talking about many youngsters that are not taking the opportunity to retrain or to do an apprenticeship. I'm talking about the people that don't want to go work. I'm not knocking the people that go work. Anybody that goes to work, I absolutely admire, irrespective of the job. But we are talking here of the lazy culture that, unfortunately, like their other guest said, have got so used to having money, benefit money, and given money to stay at home, where, you know, if we stopped all that, we would get back to being hard work Brits again. And I think we can. I think Liz Truss is the person, I think she's going to be the nearest thing we've ever had to Margaret Thatcher. Well, she'll only be the third woman Prime Minister, or the second one, isn't it? No, third, of course. And I just feel that she's going to, you know, really incentivise people into the workplace. I really do.
Andre Walker, sorry, go on, Andre, yeah.
It's worth pointing out that I don't think either Charlie or I are running down British people per se, because I don't think it's a British thing. I think it's something to do with the benefits culture. I think it's something to do with lack of education in schools. I think there's a problem with throwing young people on the scrap heap if they're not necessarily academic. I think there's a whole heap of things that have been done in Britain to British people that has caused us to create effectively an underclass of people who believe that benefits are a lifestyle choice rather than something that should be a safety net. And that's something that we should be apologising to these people for, not necessarily vilifying them, but it is a problem. No doubt about that.
Andre Walker, Charlie Mullins, really appreciate your time both. Thanks very much indeed. Just a very brief word from Tim Montgomery, and it's on this point. I'm almost surprised neither Charlie nor Andre mentioned it. Tomorrow's A-Levels results day, we'll be getting tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of young people, I think, who might be more apt to go into the workplace, who instead will delay their entry into the workforce, and some of them will develop some bad habits.
Colin, this is another question you've asked me. Isn't it time for my tea break by now? I've been going for nearly an hour, you know. But no, you're completely right. And you know, I think a lot of young people, of course, are frightened at the moment because of the nature of, you know, the coming recession. I think we're almost certainly going to have a recession. And so for them choosing perhaps to choose further education or a gap year for a little while is completely understandable.
OK, Tim, for now, thanks very much indeed. Time for 5 to 5. At 5, the supermarket chain Iceland is to offer customers interest-free loans to help with their food shop as the rate of inflation hits double digits today. The scheme comes from a regional pilot trial which saw 92% of customers either reduce or stop having to use food banks entirely. It's like the old days, food on tick at the corner shop. At 4, Thames Waters announced a hosepipe ban for 15 million customers starting from the 24th of August. There's reports that the River Thames has reached its lowest level since 2005 after months of below average rainfall and extreme temperatures in July and August, notwithstanding today's thunderstorms. At 3, Elon Musk has confirmed he won't be purchasing Manchester United Football Club after causing a social media storm last night. The SpaceX founder tweeted that he was buying the club. Later said it was a joke. The club's a joke, I think is what he meant. And at 2, NASA is transporting its new 100-metre tall moon rocket to a launch pad at the Kennedy Space Center, the Artemis. She's scheduled to launch on August the 29th. Won't carry any crew, but will serve as a test flight for future missions with astronauts that could see boots on the lunar dust by 2025. And at 1, working from home might be commonplace now, but what about working from the beach? A TikTok user has spotted a remote worker setting up a green screen on a beach. Social media users speculated it was being used to fake Zoom backgrounds for video calls. I wonder. 5 things you might want to know about before 5 o'clock this afternoon. Just time for Tim Montgomery, who's not had his cup of tea, but may have something to say about any of those stories. You take your pick. Manchester United?
So, Man United, goodness gracious. My Saturday, I come from Salisbury, or live in Salisbury, so obviously I support Manchester United. And it's not the happiest of times at the moment. But when we used to lose, narrowly against top teams, I could kind of understand it. But this sort of collapse, losing 4-0 to Brentford, they really aren't at the bottom of the table now. It's almost like it's a psychological phenomenon now as well. But I think amidst all the gloomy news, apart from us Man United fans, I think it's cheering everyone else up, isn't it?
Well, be that as it may. 2 other stories there. Elon Musk, we can't stop talking about him, but it does feel sometimes like he can set the hair running on stock markets, can't he?
Yeah.
I mean, setting aside the football, I mean, he speaks, people listen for better or for worse. I'm a fan.
Well, one of his other tweets, which we could have featured, was he talked about a mum being the best job the most important job in the world. I don't know whether you saw that one. And I say amen to that.
Yeah, me too.
I think Keir Starmer earlier in the week, he said, I'm never going to apologise for being on holiday. I have 2 most important jobs. One is being leader of the opposition, but one is being a dad. And we just so undervalue parenting in our culture. And when people stick up for it, I just say amen.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. Which we can't keep doing that. It's quite boring, Tim.
Well, agreeing.
Yeah, we'll try and cure that in the next hour. Thanks very much indeed, Tim Montgomery. Well, first, we're going to bring you a look at a GB News exclusive that's coming up for you this evening.
Setting off from a beach in northwestern France, the latest small boat heading for UK waters. GB News has witnessed a cat-and-mouse tactics between the police and the people smugglers. The police setting off tear gas to disperse the migrants. The life jackets hardly even hidden, awaiting the next group to attempt the crossing. And the documents showing some have already applied for asylum in Europe. Join us for our Migrants exclusive on Farage tonight at 7.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Just the stroke of 5 o'clock coming up right now. It's 5 o'clock. Welcome to Brazier. Coming up live at 5. GB News has filmed exclusive footage, which we're about to show you plenty of. The battle between people smuggling gangs and French police as migrants try to board small boats bound for the UK. We've got reaction and analysis with GB News presenter Nigel Farage in the next few moments. Also, detectives investigating the murder of a grandfather stabbed while riding a mobility scooter in broad daylight, have released images of a man seen running away from the scene armed with a knife. This is the hideous story of 87-year-old Thomas O'Halloran, the sixth murder in 5 days in London, and by far and away, I think, the most shocking. How safe are the streets of our capital city? Our debate this hour will ask, are RAF diversity quotas what the country needs? The recruitment chief of the RAF has quit, apparently over a row suggesting the service had put a pause on hiring white men. With me for the next hour, the senior GB News contributor Tim Montgomery. But first, we've got the latest news headlines with Ray.
Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 5. I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. Inflation is rising at its fastest pace in 40 years. The Consumer Price Index rose to 10.1% in July from 9.4% in June. Rising food prices are believed to be making the biggest impact. It follows the news yesterday that wages are falling at their fastest rate since records began. Speaking after the latest hustings in Northern Ireland, Prime Ministerial hopefuls Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss said they have the right to plan for the economy.
Today's inflation figures show how serious the situation is. Inflation is the enemy. It makes everyone poorer, it destroys jobs, it eats into people's pensions and savings, and it pushes up mortgage rates. As I've consistently said, inflation is the greatest challenge facing the new Prime Minister. Now, I have the right plan to get a grip of inflation, to support the people who most need our help with the cost of living, and to grow our economy so that we never have to deal with this again.
What I'm not going to do on this show is predict a future budget, but what I can assure people is this is an urgent issue and I will make sure it's dealt with. Ultimately, I want a high-wage, high-growth economy. The fact is we've had 2 decades of low growth in this country. I will not continue with business as usual. I will be bold in making the change we need to help people right across our country.
Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer, however, believes the government has lost control of the economy.
So you've got a stark contrast here, a zombie government doing absolutely nothing to keep inflation down, and we keep seeing it creep up. A Labour Party that says, here's a plan not only to freeze energy prices this autumn, which is going to cause many people to struggle, but also bring inflation down by 4%.
An elderly man who was stabbed to death while riding a mobility scooter has been named as 87-year-old Thomas O'Halloran. Police are describing the attack in Greenford, West London, as a shocking act of unprovoked violence. Detectives have released images of a man fleeing the scene, armed with a knife, who they want to speak to as a matter of urgency. He's described as wearing grey shorts, a dark T-shirt and a white baseball cap. The trial of former Man United player Ryan Giggs for allegedly assaulting his girlfriend and her sister is still underway. Mr Giggs denies the charges and earlier on broke down in court as he described spending a night in the cells. Sophie Reaper, GB News' North West reporter, is outside Manchester Crown Court. Sophie, it's been a day of emotional testimony.
Yeah, it has, and day 8's just come to a conclusion here at Manchester Crown Court. And today, Mr. Giggs told the court that he never assaulted either of the Greville sisters and that the alleged headbutt that his ex-girlfriend, Ms. Greville, accused him of was in fact an accidental clash of heads. He also described the arrest and the night he spent in the cells, and in doing so broke down in tears, describing it as the worst experience of his life. Once the defence questions were over, we moved on to the cross-examination with the prosecution. And it was here that Mr. Giggs admitted that he can sometimes be hot-headed and impetuous, but he denied being coercive and controlling. Mr. Giggs did accept that he does have flaws in his personality, but he was adamant that violence is not one of them. He denies all 3 of the charges that he's been accused of.
Sophie, thank you very much. To other news now, and rail, tube and bus passengers face fresh travel disruption over the next few days as tens of thousands of staff walk out in disputes over pay and conditions. Members of the RMT, TSSA and Unite unions will be involved in the action. Tomorrow and Saturday, only a fifth of overground services will be running as staff working for Network Rail and several other train operators strike, along with London United bus drivers. Meanwhile, on Friday, London Underground and buses in the capital will be hit again by walkouts. Network Rail's chief negotiator says the strikes damage the industry as well as passengers. Royal Mail workers have voted in favour of strike action in a dispute over terms and conditions. The Communication Workers Union said the decision of its members was overwhelming. It follows a separate planned strike over pay, with 4 days of walkouts scheduled for later this month and in September. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Colin Brazier.
Hi, thanks for your company. 6 minutes past 5. A lot of you write to us telling us that you don't feel enough attention is given by mainstream news media to what's happening in the channel. Well, we do, and GB News has witnessed the cat-and-mouse tactics between French police and channel migrants as the authorities face an almost impossible task of mounting effective patrols over many, many miles of the French coastline. Over days of filming, our team saw police using beach buggies to intercept groups of migrants before dispersing them with tear gas. However, the criminal gangs then are simply regrouping before making a dash for the sea again, the very moment police move off to chase other groups of migrants further down the beach. Let's turn to GB News presenter Nigel Farage, who's been following this story intently and looking at these pictures. Nigel, what did you make of them?
Very good. I mean, number one, we've got the most spectacular footage that we'll show tonight that's ever been seen of these beach launches, of the operations on the beaches. And truth of it is that it's very easy to blame the French. It's all the French's fault. The French don't care. They just take our money and ship these people across to the United Kingdom. The truth is, it's virtually impossible to police those beaches, given they don't have the powers to simply arrest the men that are loitering in those areas. And maybe, Colin, we should start blaming ourselves. Maybe it's the pull factors. That's why people are crossing the English Channel. I also think what we'll see tonight is we talk a lot, and quite rightly, about people in Kent being genuinely upset and quite scared. You know, dinghies landing on the beaches, people disappearing into the countryside. Well, just imagine being a resident near a beach in northern France, what life is like. So I think what we've got here is a very balanced package that gives us a much better understanding of the truth of what is going on. And I think we need to stop pointing the finger of accusation and talk about how we deal with the problem ourselves.
And the drone footage is incredible, isn't it? And apart from anything else, it just reminds you that actually right now, high summer, you've got a mill pond. I mean, the English Channel is traversable in a way that is clearly much more difficult in the winter. But what's been a remarkable feature of the last 2 or 3 years and the influx of migrants across the Channel is that the seasons are no longer an impediment. The numbers keep coming throughout the course of the year, including winter.
Yes, the numbers, as you say, are double what they were last year. They'll come all through the winter, as they did last year. What is also noticeable is the ratio of young men goes up and up and up. It's over 90% male thus far this year. And, of course, the recent twist that we've learnt, that vast numbers of them are Albanians. They're coming from a country that is a NATO member, a country that is an EU applicant member, a country where many Brits go abroad on holiday, and we should, Colin, be able to deport every single one of them immediately. And yet, because of yet another poison pill that Theresa May's left us, because of the Modern Slavery Act, they claim that once they get to the UK, they're taken into modern-day slavery by gangs, and we struggle to get rid of them. So we really are in the most almighty mess with this. You might have noticed that Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss say very little about this subject at all, and I don't think either of them have got the courage to face up to what needs to be done.
Montgomery in the studio with me for the next hour. I think he's got a question for you.
Hi, Nigel. I saw you interviewing the former Australian Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, on Talking Pints last night, and I have an idea. He's underemployed at the moment. Why don't the next Prime Minister appoint him to run a separate Borders Department, take it out of the already busy Home Office? He's already succeeded in curbing this problem in Australia. Wouldn't that be a dramatic signal by the new Prime Minister that finally they were serious about this issue?
It really would, Tim, if, and oh, by the way, I'd actually rather he became the Prime Minister, but never mind. That's not going to happen. I mean, yes, of course, we could do that, but let's face reality. Unless we get a proper Brexit, unless we complete the Brexit process, and that means leaving the European Convention on Human Rights, leaving the European Court of Human Rights, amending the Human Rights Act that Tony Blair put in, and you'll also notice that the problem with the Modern Slavery Act that Mrs May left us is, of course, that incorporates ECHR within it too. If you were to give someone like Tony Abbott the ability to draft legislation, to prepare things for the government, to give us that proper Brexit, then yes, it would be worth doing. Otherwise, we're going to go on pretending, as Johnson did at Lid 4 months ago, we're going to go on pretending we've got solutions when we haven't. We have to face up to the absolute reality. We can never, ever control our borders with our ECHR commitment and with some of the definitions the United Nations currently have of what is a refugee. And if we don't do that, then the numbers that come will grow and grow. Anger in the country will grow. And I tell you what, the Conservatives could lose the next general election on this issue alone.
Well, some amazing footage. We're looking at the pictures now. Apologies if you're listening on the radio, but they are amazing drone pictures that we've obtained, and we are telling a story that often, I think it's probably fair to say, isn't told nearly enough. Nigel, Tim, thanks both very much indeed. The latest set of inflation figures now stand at 10.1% in the 12 months to July. That is a new 40-year high. The Bank of England is forecasting a peak number of more than 13% come October, with the cost of living squeeze hitting households showing little sign of diminishing. This winter, the energy price cap is forecast to rise to over £3,500, some say higher still. Earlier today, the Chancellor, Nadhim Zahawi, vowed to leave no stone unturned to offer families and businesses support.
We prepare all the options ready for the incoming Prime Minister on the 5th September to hit the ground running of what more we can do, whether it is the green levies that we need to remove to help with those energy bills, cutting taxes, increasing our gas production here at home. And of course, the one thing that I'm beginning to really get concerned about is the impact on small businesses because of the energy spike that they're seeing, which is obviously going to put huge pressure on SMEs. 5.9 million small businesses are the backbone of the British economy.
Nadhim Zahawi there, Chancellor, for now, not expected to survive the new Prime Minister, most likely Liz Truss. The Labour MP and Shadow Minister for Food, Farming and Fisheries is Daniel Zeichner, who joins us now. Daniel Zeichner, thanks for your time, appreciate it. Some forecasters were suggesting the inflation figure would come in below 10%, it's a fraction above 10%, but others are saying actually it's transitory. Come October, we'll hit the peak and then it starts to come down.
Well, I think we would all hope so, but that's not what it looks like, unfortunately. And this is a real blow for so many people. I've got so many of my constituents who are asking me, what's it going to be like in the autumn, not just with food prices, but with the energy bills as well. And of course, this week, Keir Starmer laid out a plan, which we would love the government to adopt, but they're showing no sign of doing it at the moment, which would actually deal with that issue and cap those bills.
Is part of the problem with the plan to cap those bills that it would cost over 6 months £30 billion? Well, we think, because we don't know for sure, do we? Because we don't know what the fuel bills, the wholesale fuel bills will be.
Well, it would actually get back some of those incredible profits that are going to the energy companies at the moment. So much so, of course, that a while ago, one of the chief executives said they didn't even know what to do with all the money they're gathering in. So why not get it back from them and put it back in the pockets of hard-working people who actually desperately need it back? That's the way to tackle this at source.
Is that? I mean, just to take they're not here to, the big oil's not here to answer that charge. But you know what they say in reply? They say we have good years. We're having a cracker this year, but we have terrible years, and we need the money for oil and gas exploration. We need the money to make sure we can produce fuel more cleanly, produce green fuel, and get away from hydrocarbons and all the rest of it. And there's a point of principle, which is, given that we've already got a 25% windfall tax, that, companies ought to be allowed to make profits. I mean, yes, sometimes their bosses can say things capitalists would probably rather they didn't say, but some of that money finds its way into pension funds that enriches us all.
Oh, come on. Look, we argued for a windfall tax for months, and in the end, Rishi Sunak finally reluctantly introduced it, with a huge, great loophole in it, which allowed them not to pay it. So what we're saying is do it properly, backdate it. There should not be that huge amount of money accumulating with the energy companies. They're frankly embarrassed about it. And in fact, they themselves are suggesting something not dissimilar. So it really isn't that hard to do, but it needs some political will.
Daniel Zeitler, appreciate your time today. Thanks very much indeed. Tim Montgomery is alongside me to ponder on inflation, windfall taxes and assorted matters. Not many people stick their heads above the parapet to put the point of view of big oil, big gas. I felt minded to there. It's not a very popular position, but there's something else which I could mention, I suppose. This idea that in a functioning democracy and with a capitalist system, mixed economy as we have, it's slightly dangerous to start retrospectively saying, actually, those profits you thought you'd made, you didn't quite make that much.
It is dangerous. Look, and I think I'm with you in general, and I'm with Liz Truss when she said, profit's becoming a dirty word and we need to be careful about that. The fact is that a lot of the utility and energy companies aren't getting the return on investment that they need long run to be sustainable. But we're in the middle at the moment of an unprecedented crisis. These are inflation rates and energy bills that we have not faced the likes of before. These people who run these companies aren't just capitalists, they should be human beings. Yeah. And just for a couple of years, taking a hit on their profits, making a sacrifice just so that families can face the winter without fear, I think the long-term brand advantage to these energy companies would be so huge if they were less concerned about their short-term interests and thought about the national and the international good.
Tim, thanks very much indeed. Lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on Tim's Speaker's Corner, his letter to Boris Johnson. It's quite a rude letter, actually. Paul says, I like Boris, but go on, Tim. Tony says, I feel let down by Boris Johnson and his 80-seat majority, along with most of the Conservative Party, or should I say, the Liberals/Greens. Alan says, as a long-standing Boris supporter, I believe Tim's monologue was brilliant and from the heart. I hope Liz Truss is looking for advisers as honest and forthright as herself. Or does he mean Tim? I'm positive for our future. Monica says, well done, Tim, spot on. You covered all the reasons why he failed us. I don't know why people say it's about Partygate. I feel very aggrieved. One can only hope for a very strong Prime Minister who gets a grip on our lovely country. And yes, Liz is right about the lack of graft, which, by the way, is nothing new. Keep the emails coming in. You're with Colin Brazier. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, detectives investigating the murder of a grandfather. He was stabbed in broad daylight yesterday riding a mobility scooter. A man They're not far short of 90 years of age, on a mobility scooter, stabbed. What on earth's going on? Police have released images of a man seen running away from the scene armed with a knife. We'll be discussing that and asking a former Scotland Yard detective, Peter Blexley, how safe really are the streets of London and elsewhere. First, it's time for the weather.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Intense thunderstorms are now occurring across parts of southern England, mainly the far southeast. It is much drier and brighter now elsewhere as a ridge of high pressure moves into Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern England. But for the southern half of the UK, a lot of cloud remains, some showers remain, but the most intense thunderstorms are mainly affecting the far south and southeast, where there is the risk of flooding, there's the risk of very difficult driving conditions with frequent flashes of lightning, an awful lot of rainfall in a short space of time, and some hail. They do move out of the way, or at least ease up overnight. A lot of cloud remains in the southeast, as well as the northwest, where some rain will turn up by dawn. And temperatures mostly in the mid-teens, but where we've got clear skies for southwest England, parts of Wales and northern England, a sunny start but a fresh start to Thursday. That slice of sunshine crosses the country, so it moves southeastwards. Early showers get out of the way from the far southeast, and then a dry day here. And for Scotland, Northern Ireland, early rain moves away to be replaced by showers, but the rain mostly affects, by the end of the afternoon, parts of Wales and northwest England, some heavy bursts here. 20 Celsius under the rain in the northwest, but I think still the potential for mid-20s towards the southeast with some sunshine in the afternoon. Those outbreaks of rain transfer southeastwards through the night, so that by dawn on Friday it's showers again affecting East Anglia in the southeast, although not as heavy as today's. And it's another warm night, 19 Celsius in the southeast, but much fresher for Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern and western England and Wales. Plenty of sunshine here first thing Friday. Further showers arrive into Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England. Early showers move out of the way from the southeast, and then a sunny day to come here. And on Saturday we'll see more sunshine, especially at first, before further showers and a keen breeze in the north.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
You just heard from Nigel Farage, top of our programme this hour. You'll hear from him again at 7 o'clock with some extraordinary footage from the French coastline, showing people boarding boats. We've put some drones up and it tells quite a story. You've responded with emails. Here's a selection. Jez says, these migrants are breaking the law, so charge every one of them. Tell them if they stay, they will be heavily fined and imprisoned. If they've hidden our identity, that's another offence. Start putting them in court. No need for Rwanda. Simple choice, prison or go home. Jill says, I was informed by one migrant that he phones his friends and tells them to come here. They give you a house, they give you money, they give you everything. We should make it plain that they will not have access to anything, including legal aid, education, health, housing and money. Nothing will change. We always hear about their rights. What about ours? Steve says, instead of putting migrants into hotels on land, why not commission a couple of cruise ships parked offshore and take them straight there and process them before sending them to Rwanda if they fail their asylum applications? Just a word from Tim Montgomery, who's alongside me. It's been provoked by that final email, Tim. Hasn't that been thought of before? Something along those lines, a sort of floating accommodation block for asylum.
That's right, and you're using old ships and things. But I'm afraid, until we start sending these migrants back, they will keep coming. And frankly, lots of interesting thoughts from viewers. But the idea of saying, go home or go to prison. Prison's incredibly expensive, and some of them think they may just be a short term in prison. They may even be willing to put up with that. So it really has to be, we have to start sending these people back in large numbers or we won't stop these flows.
Thank you, Tim. Now, the Metropolitan Police have described the murder of an 87-year-old man who was stabbed to death while riding a mobility scooter as, quote, a shocking act of unprovoked violence. This is the truly terrible story of Thomas O'Halloran, who managed to travel some 75 yards on his scooter to seek help from a passerby before he died. Detectives have released images of a man fleeing from the scene armed with a knife, who they want to identify and speak to, as the jargon goes, as a matter of urgency. The attack, it was in the London suburb of Greenford. It's the latest of half a dozen killings in the course of 5 days in our capital city. A police spokesman stressed that officers were doing all they could to solve the horrendous crimes and added that London remains one of the safest cities in the world. I'm sure that may have some statistical basis, but it does sound like a bit of a hollow boast today, doesn't it? We're joined by the former Metropolitan Police Detective, Peter Blexley. Peter, welcome to you and thanks for coming in. We're keen to draw attention to this story today because it feels like one of those stories that I suspect 20 years ago would have left the nation horrified and wanting to ventilate. So let's talk about it.
Of course, it is an utterly ghastly crime. My thoughts and best wishes go out to Mr. O'Halloran's family and everybody who loved him. I mean, when we look at that image of him, as myself and Mr. Montgomery were saying before we came on air, he kind of reminded me of my dad, who's no longer with us. And I'm sure many people were reminded of an elderly relative, a much-loved person that's now no longer with us. My dad died of natural causes. Mr. O'Halloran had his dotage cut short in a violent and appalling way. The Metropolitan Police, whilst they've come in for a lot of criticism, quite rightly, in recent months, tend to get some of the big things right, and they do them well. And I suspect that the senior investigating officer in charge of this case will be given every resource that he needs. And I urge everybody to once again take a look at the image of the man who is wanted in connection with this crime. And please, do you recognise that person? And if you do, then do the right and honourable thing and pick up the phone.
Tim and I, during an earlier commercial break, Peter, were just discussing what would run through the mind of maybe somebody who was seeking to mug a busker because perhaps he was carrying cash or whatever. We understand the mugging motive, we understand the robbery motive. Why stab a man nearly 90 on a mobility scooter to death?
Motive sometimes is a much overrated element to investigations, in my mind, because sometimes we, as right-thinking individuals, simply cannot get into the mind of a troubled or a wicked or evil soul. And it's often a waste of time, even trying to contemplate. Deal with the facts as they are presented to you. Search for every scrap of evidence that you possibly can. Interview each witness, knock on every door, gather the evidence and find the person that they believe is responsible.
I was tweeting yesterday evening about this story and I said it spoke to something depraved about the streets of our capital, and I was corrected, or people sought to correct me online by saying, actually, Colin, hold on. You know, the streets of London are not scenes of Mad Max-type disorder. The statistics actually tell a different story. Who's right?
I followed that reaction to your social media posting with some interest, and there was a huge array of differing opinions, really. And we hear only now the Met saying London is one of the safest cities in the world. So be it. At the moment, it doesn't feel as safe as I would like it to be. And I think the way people feel anecdotally, what they hear, what their kind of perception of their city, wherever it may be in the UK, is very important. And these recent murders, of course, deeply concern me. And I just can't help but feel this city isn't as safe as I would like it to be.
Tim Montgomery.
I think you're right to be worried, Colin, because putting this story and the last one together, we've got people crossing the channel. People feel the borders under control. People are hearing of knife crimes, largely perpetrated against young people, now perpetrated against the senior citizen. And people feel that somehow the territory of the country is not under full control. And that's one of the most basic responsibilities of government, defence of the realm, keeping order. And if people feel there's slippage, it's right to be vigilant, because where does this go? And, you know, until we really give the police the resources and the backing that they need, we will see these problems continue, I'm afraid. So I think people's fears are sometimes exaggerated by the media, but just at the moment, I think we need to think, have we got the balance right between rights and responsibilities for citizens?
And apologies if this sounds a bit like media navel-gazing, but just in terms of putting the spotlight on one particular crime, there's that dreadful quote attributed to Joseph Stalin, of all people, who said, was confronted with mass crimes and killing huge numbers of people, and he said, 1 million dead is a statistic, 1 dead is a tragedy. People sometimes hear that nearly 60 people have died in London in a year. That sort of goes over their head. When you look at a picture of a grandfather, like Mr O'Halloran, staring back at you, and you know the circumstances of his death, that starts to bring certain realities home in a way that a blizzard of statistics don't always, Peter.
It does not go over your head if you have to spend time with the loved ones who have lost a family member or a close friend to murder. Quite simply, the time you spend with those people stays with you, and of course, the loss stays with them. They get the life sentence. So it's not 60, it's not 30, it's not 100. You can throw whatever numbers you want. The people who loved Mr O'Halloran will be in bits tonight. And once again, I make no apology for saying that my thoughts are with them.
Peter Blexley, we thank you for your expertise and your time. Thanks very much indeed. And Tim Montgomery as well. Thanks both very much indeed. Let us know your thoughts, please. Your emails most welcome. We'll try and share as many of them as we can. You've had lots in, not least on Tim Montgomery's Speaker's Corner contribution, his letter to Boris Johnson a little while ago, and also that extraordinary footage from the French coastline. Nigel Farage is going to be looking at that in greater depth coming up very soon. Coming up, a 20-year-old man arrested with a crossbow near the Queen's Windsor Castle residence appeared at Westminster Magistrates Court today, charged with offences under the Treason Act. Last treason trial was that of William Joyce, Lord Haw-Haw, who was executed by hanging in 1946. We'll take a look back at the history of treason next.
It's 5:32. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Inflation is rising at its fastest pace in 40 years as the Consumer Price Index reaches double figures. It rose to 10.1% in July from 9.4% in June. It's understood rising food prices have made the biggest impact. It's as the latest figures show wages are falling at their fastest rate since records began. An 87-year-old man who was stabbed to death while riding a mobility scooter has been named as Thomas O'Halloran. Police have described the attack as a shocking act of unprovoked violence. Detectives have released images of a man fleeing the scene armed with a knife that they want to speak to. Rail, tube and bus passengers face fresh travel disruption over the next few days as tens of thousands of staff walk out in disputes over pay and conditions. RMT, TSSA and Unite union members will be involved in the action. Tomorrow and Saturday, only a fifth of overground services will run. Meanwhile, on Friday, London Underground and buses in the capital will be hit again by walkouts. Royal Mail workers have voted in favour of strike action in a dispute over terms and conditions. The Communication Workers Union said the decision of its members was overwhelming. It follows a separate planned strike over pay, with 4 days of walkouts scheduled for later this month and in September. And parts of the UK have seen torrential rain after weeks of intense heat waves. Areas in London, including Stoke Newington in the borough of Hackney, have experienced flash flooding. Earlier on, the Met Office issued amber weather warnings for South East England, saying fast-flowing floodwater could be a danger to life. Yellow weather warnings cover central and southern England and South Wales. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Back in just a moment to Colin Brazier.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Setting off from a beach in northwestern France, the latest small boat heading for UK waters. GB News has witnessed a cat-and-mouse tactics between the police and the people smugglers. The police setting off tear gas to disperse the migrants. The life jackets hardly even hidden, awaiting the next group to attempt the crossing. And the documents showing some have already applied for asylum in Europe. Join us for our Migrants exclusive on Farage tonight at 7.
Now, a supermarket worker appeared in court today charged with treason after invading the grounds of Windsor Castle on Christmas Day, armed with a loaded crossbow. Westminster Magistrates Court heard that Jaswant Singh Chahal allegedly told guards, "I'm here to kill the Queen." Chahal, who's 20, is charged under Britain's 1842 Treason Act. The last treason trial was that of William Joyce, a.k.a. Lord Haw-Haw, who was executed by hanging in 1946. We're joined by the historian and author David Oldroyd-Bolt. David, thanks so much for coming in. Thanks. Treason, it has this resonance, doesn't it? Some people will be surprised to think it's still on the statute book.
Well, the point is that it's the most serious crime, I think, that anyone can commit, because you're attacking the crown, the sovereign, who is the embodiment of the nation. That's why it carried such an egregious and torturous penalty. Until 1842, the official penalty was to be hanged by the neck, cut down, eviscerated while still alive, and then after death for the body to be quartered and for the four quarters of the body to be...
That was still on the statute?
It was. It wasn't used. The last time it was used was long before that. The last beheading for treason was 1747, Lord Lovat. But until the time of the Cato Street conspiracy, it was technically the penalty. They were, in fact, sentenced to that. The drawing and quartering was commuted, so they were only hanged. And indeed, as you said, Lord Haw, William Joyce, executed in 1946. The year before that, Julian Amery, the son of the cabinet minister Leo Amery, was executed by hanging.
Was he also, obviously, people have heard of Lord Haw, and they know he was this great, apologist for the Nazis and all the rest of it, and they get the treason charge. Amery?
Julian Amery had attempted to drum up a regiment of the British Free Corps to fight for the Nazis against Britain. And it was a great scandal. His one of his brothers at least, died fighting for Britain against the Nazis. As I say, his father, Leo Amery, a great friend of Churchill's. It was a huge scandal at the time. But it's since 1351 when the Treason Act was first put into statute. Before that, it was entirely down to the monarch what constituted treason and what the punishments were. Since 1351, it's been entirely about the fact that by attacking the monarch, or by attempting to take the life of the monarch, you are striking at exactly the heart of the nation. And therefore, it can't be allowed to fly. I mean, the fact that it was, from 1998 onwards, it's only been punishable by imprisonment, I think slightly downgrades it as a crime. The reason for this being that essentially there has been no execution in this country since the 1950s, late 1950s, early 60s, and it was thought that by having this one offence on the statute book, it was a typical piece of Blair legislation to level everything out, rather than accepting the fact that it is an egregious crime that endangers the whole country.
Tim Montgomery, it's just one of those words, isn't it? I mean, even stripping away the legalistic aspects of it, it conjures up stuff, doesn't it? Treason.
And absolutely, it isn't just about endangering the Queen or the monarch. It's, as you absolutely rightly say, we have this idea of someone who so hates, wants to betray the nation and our core beliefs, that it's a crime against all of us. It's a crime against the moral bonds that form this country. And so it's quite right that we don't hang, draw and quarter people anymore, but the idea that it should have a special place in law, I think, is still right.
Yeah, occasionally you'll find politicians saying, bring back treason as a crime that's more applicable.
There have been various Home Secretaries who've thought about prosecuting terrorists under whichever Treason Act they decided to use. And I think the last time it was really seriously encompassed was in about 2011. It should, I think, certainly retain that special place within the nation's mind as that thing which attacks us all.
Yeah.
A murder, for instance, for which, of course, execution was the penalty until the abolition of the death penalty, is an attack, an egregious attack and an evil attack, but an attack against the individual. I think the special nature of treason is that, as Tim says, it's that true hatred for everything that we are. And it surprises me that, in fact, the 7/7 bombers were not charged under the Treason Act that exists. It surprises me that whenever there is an attempt at a treacherous act in this country, an attack of terrorism, you could have said that London Bridge fell under that, or that the Manchester Arena fell under that. It should be used because it should be exemplary. I mean, there were certain oddities about it. For instance, James Hewitt, by having had a 5-year affair with Diana, Princess of Wales, in the 1980s, technically committed treason. But because he didn't admit it until 3 years later, and because it was no longer ongoing, he wouldn't then have been charged with treason. Had he admitted it under British law at the time, he should have been charged with high treason.
Good God. Wow. David, you saved the best till last.
You did.
David Oldroyd-Bold, thanks so much for coming in. Really appreciate it. Thanks very much indeed. Time for our debate this hour. The head of the RAF recruitment, the boss, the woman in charge of recruiting staff to the NHS, new recruits, has resigned, it's reported, amid claims that the service, the RAF, has paused recruitment of white men to reach diversity targets. Anonymous sources, it's always slightly naughty, isn't it, quoting anonymous sources, but it's made the newspapers. Anonymous sources reportedly saying that the senior female officer handed in a notice in protest that the hiring restrictions could affect the fighting strength of the RAF. And it's worth remembering that, isn't it? This isn't just another arm of government. It's the people who keep us safest and who are flying missions right now over airspace to deter Russian aggressors, for instance. A spokesman for Rishi Sunak's leadership campaign said, "The only thing that should matter in recruitment is the content of your character, not your sex or the colour of your skin." So we're asking, are these alleged RAF diversity targets a good thing? Do they achieve anything useful? The journalist and broadcaster Sam Dowler joins us for this one. And here in the studio, Tim Montgomery is going to strike a different pose. Sam, welcome to you. Thanks for joining us. We want a military that reflects the diversity of Britain at large, but we also, given the nature of what they're charged with doing, keeping us safe, we want the best people for the job. How do we square those two things?
Well, at the end of the day, as you said, this is an anonymous source, and there's an RAF spokesperson who's already said there was no pause in Royal Air Force recruitment and no new policy with regards to meeting in-year recruitment. So it is sort of dog whistle reporting that to make people think, oh, you know, Jimmy, white man Jimmy, who wants to fulfil his dream of being in the RAF, is being turned away because they're giving it to, you know, people of colour or women. I don't think that's the case. What I do think is it is very important to have diversity within our armed forces for a variety of reasons. I think it is. Obviously, it's hearsay, and I don't necessarily think it's true. But I do think, as I said, that diversity is incredibly important because it has to reflect our population. And you know, obviously, they struggle to get people to join up with the RAF, women especially, and people of colour especially.
Tim Montgomery.
Well, I'm in favour of diversity. I think when organisations have people who all look the same, you know, that discourages people from necessarily applying to those organisations. When you have people that all think the same, you get kinds of groupthink, whereby organisations aren't as flexible as they need to be. But what I don't like about this story, and there has clearly been a high-level resignation, so I think there is some substance to this story, and the Ministry of Defence can't just dismiss it, is we already have big recruitment problems. Our armed forces are under strength at a time which viewers don't need to be reminded is at a time when, you know, Europe has had its first major war on its soil. And to put sort of diversity targets ahead of the need to bring our military up to strength just seems a very poor priority for a Conservative government in particular, for any government, but particularly for a Conservative government.
Yeah, I mean, Sam, the point that Tim makes about recruitment problems is a real one. You know, I've talked to somebody I can think of in the army who said it's a massive problem now. There's a sort of missing cohort of young people in their late teens, early 20s who do not, you know, who are much sought after by the hospitality sector, computer programming, retail, whatever it is. And, you know, what we can't have happen, and, you know, as Tim suggests, to get a high-profile resignation suggests perhaps it is happening, is turning away people who are willing to fill these roles.
Of course, and as I said, obviously it's quite emotive for people to imagine young recruits being turned away in favour of other people who might even be less qualified for the jobs. And I don't think that would ever be the case. I mean, in this situation, perhaps, as you quite rightly say, it could be possibly to do with needing to attract younger people, which means, you know, give more money to defence. And people have been quoted all over the shop saying we could be rocketing towards World War III. So spending more money on defence would be a vital thing to do. And of course, you know, modern day techniques like computer programming, etc., are going to be vital, and they are already vital within the armed forces. So therefore, you need younger people who know what they're doing.
Tim, go onto YouTube. Have a look at any of the recruitment ads, really glossy, high production values for the RAF, the Royal Navy, the Army, and you will see a very diverse picture reflected back at you. I dare say, actually, compared to the actual proportions of ethnic minorities in Britain, probably higher than the actual figure truly is. But such is the determination to make Britain's armed forces less mono-ethnic. The determination is there to change things.
Yeah, I think it's a real one. It's a necessary one. You know, even though I overall think that maintaining the military strength is more important than diversity, you know, having, for example, a good number of Muslim people in the British armed forces is incredibly important. You know, we've just fought wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, or whatever people may think about those wars. You know, if you don't have sort of that basic understanding of Muslim culture, of the culture of the people that you're fighting with or against, depending on the context, then you're going to be a less effective army. And I think, if Afghans saw, people who they could empathise with in the British forces, that's obviously going to help. And so diversity does really have benefits. But the most important thing is that we have the capability in sheer numbers to win conflicts. And that must always be top of recruitment targets.
Because, Sam Dowell, what will worry people, if this is true, they will worry that, and they will say they've seen it elsewhere in some instances, rightly or wrongly, whether that's true or not. They will say, actually, what we mustn't do is lower the bar. You do not want people going into important roles by dint of their skin colour rather than their competence and commitment.
Oh, absolutely, and that's what the spokesperson for the RAF said. I mean, there is a stigma with the RAF that it's that it's for posh white men, basically, and so I think that's maybe something that's lasted for decades and decades, and obviously needs to be changed, because you need, as your guest said, you need different perspectives in order to be more productive and to be better defenders of not just us but the world at large. So I think it is to do with diversity, and they do perhaps have like a PR problem, and this certainly doesn't help.
Sam Dowler, Tim Montgomery, thanks both very much indeed. There is a right of reply, such as it is. An RAF spokesman has disputed allegations that they've paused recruitment of white men. The spokesman said there is no pause in Royal Air Force recruitment and no new policy with regards to meeting in-year recruitment requirements. Royal Air Force commanders will not shy away from the challenges we face building a service that attracts and recruits talent from every part of the UK workforce. The former Secretary of State for Health, Sajid Javid, has been cited sporting a beard this morning as he discussed tax cuts and the cost of living crisis. Is this news? Well, we're going to plough ahead with it. Sajid Javid's decision to brave the beard. There he is. Sorry if you're listening on radio. Imagine Sajid Javid with a beard. There you go. It follows an increase... Well, I'm going to read this, Tim, but I've got no faith in this script. Follows an increasing trend of men opting for different styles of facial hair, from handlebar moustaches to designer stubble. Why are men choosing to move away from the clean-shaven look and towards a bushy beard? I'm not sure any of that's true. Let's turn to Shane O'Shaughnessy, who's the owner of the barbershop, The Dandy Gent, who joins me now. Shane, hi to you. Well, you've got a magnificent bushy beard.
Thank you.
Why?
Well, they're just growing in popularity, but it can make you look more masculine. It can hide things if you've got a weak chin. It can hide many chins. I don't know. It's been a growing fashion trend, really, for about the last 10 years, and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere.
Well, I thought we'd... I'm sure I read a couple of articles 2 or 3 years ago that we'd had peak beard, and now people increasingly were shaving them off.
No, we're not seeing that. You're getting more younger people that are just going for the moustache look, but generally the beards aren't going anywhere. They're here to stay.
I'm just going to try and introduce Shane to this conversation. Tim Montgomery, who is bearded, unlike me. It's got you haven't got Shane's beard.
No, I'm pretty small fry really compared to Sean is like a Tsar of Russia with that sort of.
No, it's fabulous.
Have you never tried one?
When I was in
summer holiday,
when I was in Pakistan, and it helped to blend in and to have a beard. It was. I had a beard back then. Yeah. Shane, do you find them an aid to contemplation? Do you do the full Gandalf strokey chin?
Oh yeah, I tend to find myself sort of playing with it or twisting. Yeah. It's meant to be a sign of wisdom in some cultures.
Well, and you can get that, can't you? I just wondered, Tim Montgomery, I hope I'm not putting you in an awkward spot, because I know you count amongst your friends Sajid Javid.
Yeah.
And so it struck me there might be a possibility he's emulating you.
I think that's very unlikely, but I did actually text Laura, his wife, earlier, because I know they've been on holiday abroad, and often these things are done over the summer, aren't they? People don't want to shave when they're relaxing, and I've not yet had Laura's reply, but I know that she wasn't impressed with previous summer growths from her husband, so to be continued.
Tim, thanks very much indeed, and thanks to Shane O'Shaughnessy, the owner of the barbershop, the Dandy Gent. Shane, thanks very much indeed. We've got some emails for you, and there have been lots coming in today. Do keep your thoughts coming in, and especially you've been moved by the stabbing, the fatal stabbing of a man nearing 90 years of age in broad daylight in a London suburb yesterday tea time on his mobility scooter. It's the horrific story of Thomas O'Halloran. Mike says, time to give the vote to the nation for capital punishment. The person who did this should go first. John says, policing and the justice system in this country is not fit for purpose and virtually non-existent. Time for a radical change. Mark says, why come forward about anything if the police are going to do nothing about serious offences? If I have to go to London now, I go in, do what I need to do, and then get out. Michelle Dewberry's up next with Jubes & Co. We're going to get a sense of what her show contains today. Michelle, hi.
Hello, I'll tell you what it doesn't contain, Colin. Bushy beards. No, thank you very much. Always reminds me when I was a little kid, I read the book, The Twits, and there was a passage, pieces stuck in the beard. Oh, I've been put off ever since. Anyway, that horrific murder that you've just been talking about, you know, it stops you in your tracks when you hear things like that, doesn't it, Colin? An almost 90-year-old, as you said, murdered in the middle of the day. It makes me pause and ask, you know, is Britain lawless? Do we believe and trust in the police anymore? I'm not sure many of us do. So that's the first topic I want to get into tonight. Also, you know, this topic of religion. Should you be able to criticise religion? If so, should there be any limits, any cut-offs? Some people say we should have blasphemy laws in this country. Really? I want to ask about that. And also, Russians, tourist visas. Many Russians now in many European countries are not allowed visas to access. Should a government really, should citizens, be responsible for the actions of their government? Peter Hitchens, Frank Ferretti, joining me to get into all that tonight.
Michelle, thanks very much indeed. Tim Montgomery's been my guest for the last 2 hours. 20 seconds, Tim, and I think we should talk about Thomas O'Halloran.
One thing we didn't talk about earlier was something that GBNews has covered, another channel has missed, is these sort of steaming burglaries that took place on Oxford Street over the weekend. And I don't think you can disentangle these stories. Obviously, this murder is of a different order, but we need to restore crime. We need order on our streets very quickly.
Tim, thanks very much indeed. Have a look at Tim's monologue. It's available online. Thanks for your company.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Intense thunderstorms are now occurring across parts of southern England, mainly the far southeast. It is much drier and brighter now elsewhere as a ridge of high pressure moves into Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern England. But for the southern half of the UK, a lot of cloud remains. Some showers remain, but the most intense thunderstorms are mainly affecting the far south and southeast, where there is the risk of flooding, there's the risk of very difficult driving conditions with frequent flashes of lightning, an awful lot of rainfall in a short space of time, and some hail. They do move out of the way, or at least ease up overnight. A lot of cloud remains in the southeast, as well as the northwest, where some rain will turn up by dawn. And temperatures mostly in the mid-teens, but where we've got clear skies for southwest England, parts of Wales and northern England, a sunny start, but a fresh start to Thursday. That slice of sunshine crosses the country, so it moves southeastwards. Early showers get out of the way from the far southeast, and then a dry day here. And for Scotland, Northern Ireland, early rain moves away to be replaced by showers, but the rain mostly affects, by the end of the afternoon, parts of Wales and northwest England, some heavy bursts here. 20 Celsius under the rain in the northwest, but I think still the potential for mid-20s towards the southeast with some sunshine in the afternoon. Those outbreaks of rain transfer southeastwards through the night, so that by dawn on Friday it's showers again affecting East Anglia in the southeast, although not as heavy as today's. And it's another warm night, 19 Celsius in the southeast, but much fresher for Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern and western England and Wales. Plenty of sunshine here first thing Friday. Further showers arrive into Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England. Early showers move out of the way from the southeast, and then a sunny day to come here. And on Saturday, we'll see more sunshine, especially at first, before further showers and a keen breeze in the north.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panelists.